We can only notice these patterns when we stop long enough to evaluate. One of the most powerful things you can do is learn to ask, where in the process did I stop? And notice patterns there. Otherwise, you're just going to beat yourself up and you're going to think, oh, I'm just bad at this thing. Hello, and welcome back to another episode of the Neurodivergent Creative Podcast. Today, I'm going to talk about doing a postmortem on a creative project. So this might be a book idea or a writing project, a poetry collection, a painting, learning to play guitar, anything creative. Those of us with ADHD, which is me, tend to find a shiny object and then abandon a thing that we're working on. And we're like, no, that over there seems like way more fun. I'm going to go do that. And sometimes we do that. And other times we really do try to reach the end of a goal. So, we're going to say a poetry collection. Let's write a poetry collection. And then at some point, you just stop doing it. And this can be for several reasons. Perhaps you reach a point where you no longer know how to move forward. So maybe you have written all of the poems, but you don't know how to get them published. Whether you want to reach out, maybe find an agent and a publishing house, or you want to self-publish, or you just want to start a TikTok and put them out in the world and read your poetry there. Or if you want to find places like open mic nights or poetry nights, whatever, like there's a lot of steps. And there's a lot of paths forward. And when there's that many options, we get a thing called decision fatigue or like decision paralysis, which is where there's too many options. And so the easiest option is just shut down and do none of that. Right? Sound familiar? It's like high school for me. I was like, I'm going to take all the AP classes. And then I'm like, why did I do that? Now I'm trying to do too much and I want to do absolutely none of it. Also, shout out to Gwen behind me, the cutest doggy in the world. Okay, love you, Gwen. So that's one reason that we stop doing something. You've hit a wall and you're like, I do not know how to move forward. Other times, you might literally just forget. I made like a 5-year plan once and found it about 2 years later and was like, oh, I didn't do any of this. I forgot that I made this. So if you're not staying on top of a project and regularly making time for it and remembering that it's even there, especially if it is something that does not have a physical manifestation in your life. Like if you're learning to play the guitar and that guitar is in your room, you're going to see it until it just starts blending in with the clutter. But benefit of the doubt, you're going to see the guitar and you're going to think, oh yeah, I need the guitar. Or if you are going to a painting class, you know that you have that painting class. There's some sort of outer accountability affecting the way that you show up for whatever this project is. So if it's not on your calendar, if you're a calendar bitch like me, hey, Google Calendar is my girlfriend, or it's not being held accountable by physically being up in your face and in your space, reminding you to work on the thing, we can literally just forget. It's hard. There's a lot going on in life. So maybe you hit a wall and you don't know how to move forward. Maybe you just forgot that you were working on that thing because you've moved on to other things, right? Like we have 1,000 hobbies. We talked about this in the, is your hobby dormant or are you just over it? So sometimes you're just over it, right? You're like, I don't want to do a poetry collection anymore. But sometimes we just kind of hit a spot where the project dies. It doesn't feel good anymore for so many reasons. Maybe somebody read it and they said, I don't know, it's a little weird. I don't know if I like this. I don't know if I get this. And then you feel bad and rejected. And so you don't want to work on it, right? A bazillion reasons why somebody might abandon a project or forget about it or just leave it in the past. The thing though, and this can be done whether you achieve a goal or not, is what I like to call a postmortem. So this is once your goal is either complete or your goal has died and you're no longer working on it. The postmortem is a way for you to examine what happened, what was good, what wasn't so good, what obstacles came up, at what point in the process did you start to freak out and abandon it if we have an abandonment problem. And I call it a postmortem because it really is. Like you might not know why something worked or why something didn't work until you actually evaluate it. Evaluation is the non-CSI way to say this. And again, for the ADHD folks in the room, we tend to it's like Tarzan on the vines. We're like, okay, one project, swing into another project, swing into another project. This task is done, swing into another task, doing that task, doing this task. And we don't stop to think about, well, what went well? What didn't go so well? What would I do differently? What obstacles did I come up against? Where in the process did I stop? Or which parts of the process did I have a lot of fun in? These are all great questions that can help you repeat results. I like to say that consistency makes your results inevitable. Consistency is kind of a loaded term. And I don't mean daily. I don't mean if you write every day, one day you'll have a book done. It's that deciding to show up for whatever your project is. Like in my writing incubator, I teach that if you can write for like a couple hours a week, you can write a book in a year. Because it's true, because I've done it. But that consistency for me meant one day a week where I wrote for 2 or 3 hours. Consistency for you might look like every day for 15 minutes. Consistency for Uncle Bob might look like every other day for an hour. Consistency for Janet might look like 4 hours every Saturday. I don't know, but it's whatever is consistent for you and whatever is that bare minimum that you can consistently achieve. For example, one of my writers in the writing incubator working title, she has been coming to the coaching calls for a couple of months at this point, and she hasn't had any questions because she hasn't been feeling the writing. Like the writing has not been happening, but she did still want to keep in touch with the spirit of the project or the spirit of her book or however we want to put this. So she was just coming to the calls and I'd be like, hey, do you have a question? And she's like, no, I'm just hanging out. I'm just vibing. And I'm like, that's great. And then she was doing morning pages and had consistently done a morning pages practice, which is handwritten journaling, usually first thing in the morning, but you can really do it whenever. And she was feeling good about her consistent morning pages. And this week, when she came to the call, I was like, hey, how's it going? How's the morning pages? And she said, I worked on my book. And she got back to working on her book because she took time to go down to a very bare minimum consistent level. So when we talk about consistency and we talk about bare minimums, like I'm taking back the power of the bare minimum. It is not a bad thing. If somebody's like, oh, you only do the bare minimum, like, hell yeah, I do. And that's how I show up for myself. Get the fuck out. Like, if all we can do is the bare minimum, then yes, please do it all the time. Okay, so that's consistency, which isn't exactly on the topic of this, but it's important too. So back to this postmortem thing. I have the visual of like literally like an autopsy, like opening up a body, but it's a book, right? And I'm like, oh, well, due to the liver temperature, I can tell that you abandoned this work in progress 4 years ago. I can't tell that, but I do like to get my hands up in a work in progress and help you kind of revitalize it and figure out why you left it behind. So let's ask some questions, right? What went right or wrong in this process? So this might be evaluating what that bare minimum looked like. Was your goal to work on a thing an hour a day and that was just way unfeasible? And so then you feel shame about it and you spiral and you're like, oh, I suck at this. And then you leave it, right? Because when the choice is open up this document and feel like shit about it, or forget that this document exists and don't feel like shit about it, the answer is very clear, right? There is a secret third option, which is compassion instead of shame, which is looking at that and saying, well, of course I couldn't write at that level because I don't have an hour a day that I can dedicate to this. Maybe my consistent looks like an hour a week, where on Sunday morning I go to a coffee shop and then I work on the project there. Or I stay up late on Friday night. Nobody else is allowed to bother me. And it's my time to paint or make art, and nobody's allowed to talk to me. Whatever that thing is for you, carve out some bare minimum time to feed your creative spirit. So what went right? What went wrong? What obstacles stopped you? And what obstacles did you overcome? So maybe you found yourself very distracted by chores that you need to do in your house. You can overcome that obstacle by leaving the house to work on the project. For me, that looked like going to a coffee shop to work on my novel. If you are distracted by, say, like your kids knock on the door all the time and they're like, hey, can I have a juice box? You might overcome that obstacle by saying, like, here's all the juice boxes. You can have 2 before I come out. You don't even have to ask me. You can just have 2. And then the kids are like, hell yeah, 2 juice boxes. And you don't have to answer any questions. That's the dream. I know that kids don't always work like that. I'm not a parent, so, sometimes you can just laugh at me. That's fine. I know it's harder. That's an example of obstacles that you've overcome. How about obstacles that did stop you? So this could be things like medical flare-ups. Like if I have fibromyalgia and it's a really shitty pain day and I'm like, no, I'm not getting out of bed. Great. That's an obstacle that stopped me. And again, compassion instead of shame. It's not that obstacle stopped you, therefore you don't deserve to finish your project. It is, this obstacle stopped you. So how can we sort of navigate that in the future? Like you can't necessarily solve for a medical condition, but how can we adjust the goal or adjust that bare minimum consistency so that if you do have a flare up, you don't have to freak out. You're not like, oh, woe is me. I'm never going to get back to this because if I miss a day, I'm just fucked forever. Not true. We can make a plan to get back in there. Next question would be, what do I want to change next time? So this is where we take stock of the things that went right and wrong, the obstacles that you overcame and how, the obstacles that stopped you, and make a plan to address those the next time that you work on this project. And then my favorite part of this, and the part that I personally am most likely to avoid evaluating because I can talk about introspection all day, but it's still scary to do it sometimes. This question is, where in the process did I stop? So some people can plan and have all kinds of ideas, right? You are an idea person. You can brainstorm an amazing name for something or a great title, or you can outline. But then when it comes time to actually get into the weeds of the work, you hit a wall. Okay, so you're like a natural planner, and I love this for you. But then the implementation part doesn't come as naturally. And that might be where you tend to abandon a project. Perhaps you are decent at planning. You love the implementation part. You like getting into the nitty gritty and being like, ooh, very specifically, I'm going to plan to do this and this and this on Monday and this and this and that on Thursday. And those are my bare minimums. Just 2 days a week. I'm going to work on this thing. Love that for you. You are a planning and implementation angel. But maybe you don't know how to set limits for yourself or how to set boundaries around your time. And so you throw yourself so far into the implementation that you burn out on the project and then you resent it. We can only notice these patterns when we stop long enough to evaluate, to do that postmortem on the creative project. And one of the most powerful things that you can do, I have like little Italian hands. I'm like, it's a spicy meatball. No, I'm trying to not let that become one of my little autistic catchphrases right now. Here's hoping. Fingers crossed. One of the most powerful things you can do is learn to ask, where in the process did I stop? And notice patterns there. Otherwise, you're just going to beat yourself up and you're going to think, oh, I'm just bad at this thing. No, you're not bad at writing a poetry collection. You don't have a process for XYZ component. And if it doesn't come naturally to us, like, hey, former gifted kids, right? If I don't have a template or a rubric or a syllabus telling me exactly what steps to follow, and this is uncharted territory, sometimes I'm just going to peace out and be like, I don't know how to do that. And I don't quite have the capacity to learn. This is why I don't like board games that take like an hour to explain the rules. Like, no, once you have to like unfold a giant treasure map and explain like the backstory, I am out. I can play Uno. I can maybe play Canasta if you remind me of the rules. And I can play like Milton Bradley games. But if you bring out Terraforming Mars, I'm going to be like, there better not be expansion packs in that because I quit. I can't do it. God damn it. So where in the process do you stop and why? That is what I have for you today. I advise you to do a postmortem on any project. Literally just pick a project that you stopped and be like, where in the process did I stop that? Once you notice that, think, have I stopped at that part of the process in other things that were different? And you're probably going to blow your own mind. Please reach out and tell me how this blew your mind, because I want to know. I want to know if most of the people who hang out with me are like planners, but not implementers, or they're implementers, but they don't know how to stop implementing. I love that for us. We're all chaotic gremlins. Okay, I'm going to leave you with that. I love you. Bye.